The wind whispered through Maplewood Hollow like a warning low, restless and cold. It carried the bite of a winter that showed no signs of softening. Snow blanketed the narrow roads like forgotten memories, clinging to every corner, every fence post, every silent rooftop. The pine trees, heavy with frost, groaned in the stillness. Inside a small cottage perched at the edge of town, Thomas Reed sat alone. A battered mug of lukewarm coffee rested between his hands. The fire crackled softly, casting flickering shadows across the worn floorboards. Thomas had the kind of face that told stories even in silence, deep lines carved from war, grief, and time. A retired soldier, long used to the rhythm of loneliness. But tonight, something felt different. It started as a whisper barely there. A faint scratching sound like nails on wood. Then it grew sharper, a clawing, urgent, persistent. He stood slowly. Years of instinct still lived in his spine. At the door, framed in the warm halo of porch light, stood a German shepherd. His fur was bristled, dusted in snow. Eyes wide, alert, not fearful but pleading. No collar, no tags, but something in his gaze told Thomas this wasn't just a lost dog. This was a message. Lucky, they called him later. But that night, he was simply a sign. Thomas didn't speak. He just opened the door. The dog turned instantly, glancing back once before darting into the dark. No hesitation, no barking, just movement, as if he knew where to go and what needed to be done. Thomas grabbed his coat and flashlight and followed, boots crunching softly in the snow. His breath came in clouds, quick and shallow. His heart thudded harder with every step. The shepherd moved like a shadow through the trees, quick but quiet, weaving past snowdrifts and old fence posts, leading Thomas deeper into the forgotten edges of town. They passed a rusted gate and came upon an old barn, half collapsed, hidden behind thorny brush. The wind howled louder here. Rusty hinges moaned as the barn swayed like an old ghost remembering how to stand. Lucky pushed at the door with his shoulder and slipped inside. Thomas hesitated, then followed. It was colder in here, still, heavy. The smell of mold and old hay clung to the air. Dust danced in the beam of his flashlight as he swept it across broken stalls and sagging rafters. "Lucky?" he called. A soft whimper answered from the far corner. Thomas moved quickly, stepping over a cracked beam and piles of straw. Then he saw her, a small figure curled tight beneath a threadbare layer of hay. A child, maybe 9, too small, too still. Her skin was pale, lips dry and split. Her coat was damp, her jeans soaked and frozen to her legs. She had wrapped her arms around herself, as if clinging to the last warmth she had. "Hey there," Thomas murmured, kneeling beside her. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You're safe now. I've got you." Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused, cloudy. She didn't speak, but when Lucky nudged close and pressed his nose gently against her cheek, she moved just a little, lifting one trembling hand to touch his fur. That was enough. Thomas took off his coat and wrapped her in it, lifting her carefully like something fragile that might shatter. She didn't resist. She barely stirred. As they stepped out into the wind again, Thomas held her close to his chest, shielding her with his body. He didn't know who she was, didn't know where she'd come from, but he knew deep in his bones that no child should be alone in the cold. At the Maplewood Hollow Clinic, the staff moved quickly, voices soft but steady. The girl was laid gently onto a warm bed, thin blankets, and 4 in her arm, heat lamps glowing above her tiny frame. She didn't speak, didn't cry. She just buried her face into Lucky's neck and clung to him like a lifeline. Nurse Melanie brushed the girl's hair back with quiet care. "She's stable now," said Dr. Cullen Rivers, his voice calm, his hands practiced. "But she's dehydrated, malnourished, exhausted to the edge." Thomas stood near the wall, arms crossed, his jaw set tight. He watched her, so small, so silent, wrapped around the dog like it was the only thing keeping her heart beating. A slow ache built in his chest, one he hadn't felt in years. Not since his own daughter. Not since the day silence became his only companion. Melanie knelt beside the bed. She smiled gently and asked, "Sweetheart, can you tell us your name?" The girl blinked, eyes darting away. Then, barely above a whisper, her lips moved. "Anna, it was the only thing," she said. As the hours passed, pieces of her story unfolded, not from her, but from a neighbor washed out by the clinic and recognized her. Anna Harper, 9 years old, lives on the east side of town in a small, crumbling duplex with her parents. Her mother, Emily, works double shifts as a sanitation worker, often gone before sunrise and home well after dark. Her father, Daniel, suffered a head injury on the job nearly a year ago. He hasn't been the same since. The neighbor explained how Anna had become the caretaker, staying home instead of going to school. She cooked, cleaned, and looked after her father, who slept einen out of lucidity. Sometimes forgetting who she was, sometimes locking her out of the house. But other times he would sit beside her, call her pumping, and hum lullabies from her childhood. She never blamed him, never complained. Lucky, the neighbor said, used to be a stray, wounded and starving until Anna found him behind a grocery store. She wrapped his leg in a dish towel, fed him scraps, and whispered to him like he was family. He hadn't left her side since. Back in the clinic, Anna slept fitfully. Every time Simeon new entered the room, her eyes snapped open wide with fear. But when Lucky stirred beside her, she would close them again. There was safety in the dog. There was history in their bond. By the next morning, Anna was stable enough to leave the clinic, though she still hadn't said more than a few words. Thomas stood by the front desk, a borrowed jacket in one hand and Lie's leash in the other, waiting as Melanie knelt beside Anna to button up her coat. "You sure about this?" Melanie asked gently. "She doesn't want to stay," Thomas replied. "And I want to see where she came from." The address the neighbor gave them led to a crumbling duplex on the edge of town. The yard was overgrown. A trash can lay tipped in the snow. Thomas knocked on the door, but no one answered. "Anna," he said softly, "do you have a key?" She nodded and pulled one from her pocket. The door creaked open. Inside was chaos. Dirty dishes, unpaid bills, a room Phaeton's held warmth, but now only echoed absence. Then came footsteps. A man emerged from the back hallway. Mid-40s, graying beard, eyes unfocused. "Who are you?" he muttered, stumbling forward. "Daniel," Thomas asked. The man paused, blinked, looked past Thomas to Anna. For a moment, clarity flickered in his eyes. "Pumpkin," he said, his voice cracking. Anna rushed forward and he dropped to his knees, holding her tightly. But just as quickly, the moment vanished. He pulled back, confused again. "Why? Why are you crying?" She didn't answer. Just then, the door swung open. A woman entered, coat dusted with snow, her face pallid with exhaustion. Emily. Thomas stood and introduced himself. Then, without softening the truth, he told her what had happened. The barn, the cold, feculent girl sleeping in straw. Emily's sighs welled up with tears. She sat down in a cracked sofa, burying her face in her hands. "I didn't know," she whispered. I thought she was managing." Thomas didn't speak right away. He simply looked at Anna, who sat beside Lucky, staring at her father as ifaping. He might return to her again. That afternoon, Emily made tea, though neither she nor Thomas touched it. The small kitchen was quiet. Only the occasional clink of the spoon in an empty mug broke the stillness. "I've been working so many hours," she said finally, voice. "Double shifts, triple summer times, rents behind, food price keep going up. I thought, as long as she had a roof and something warm to eat, I thought it was enough." Thomas nodded slowly. "You didn't see the way she looked in that barn, cold, starving alone." Emily's hands trembled in her lap. "I didn't know Daniel had gotten worse." Hused. "To be so gentle after the accident. Sometimes he still is. Other times it's like he doesn't even know she's his daughter." "She's been raising him," Thomas said gently, "and herself." There was a long pause. "I can't afford a care facility," Emily whispered. "Not even clothes, and I can't quit work. I didn't know what else to do." Thomas leaned forward, voice calm but firm. "There are veteran support programs. Some are for memory care free of charge. I know people who can help get Daniel placed in the right center." Emily blinked. "You know that?" "I already started making calls." She looked at the living room where Anano sat curled next to Lucky reading a tattered children's book. "But if we send him away, she feel like she lost her father." Thomas shook his head. "She's already losing him, Emily, little by little, and if this keeps going, she'll lose herself too." That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She stood by Anna's bedroom doorway, watching her daughter breathe softly, one hand resting on Ly's back. Emily pressed a hand to her chest, listening to the quiet. She realized then that love sometimes meant choosing what hurt most so her daughter could heal. In the pale light of dawn, she knew what she had to do. The next morning, Emily showed up at Thomas's door before sunrise. Her face was drawn, eye-swollen from a night without rest. She clutched her scarf tight, as if holding together more than just the fabric. "I'm ready," she said. Thomas didn't ask for an explanation. He simply nodded and stepped aside, inviting her in. By mid-morning, they were seated at the county health office. Thomas made calls, spoke to old contacts, one of them a coordinator for a veteran medical support program that specialized in memory care. Within hours, arrangements were in motion. A spot was available at a center 2 towns over, clean, warm, and staffed by professionals trained to handle memory loss patients like Daniel. Later that afternoon, Thomas and Emily sat quietly with Anna in the living room. She held Lucky close, face buried in his neck. Emily cleared her throat. "Sweetheart, we're going to get help for Daddy." Anna didn't answer at first, then softly, "Will he still be my dad?" Thomas leaned forward. "Always." That weekend, Daniel was admitted to the care center. He was confused, frightened, but cooperative. Anna held his hand through whole time. "You're not leaving me, right?" he whispered. "No," she sagely. "But we want you to feel better." Thomas watched them from a distance, acquiescent ache pressing in his chest. Even in goodbye, there was no blame in Anna's voice, only love. Sometimes stepping away from someone you love is the most loving thing you can do. In the weeks that followed, life began to shift like yearly spring beneath a crust of lingering frost. Daniel remained at the care center. Though he didn't always recognize the faces around him, he seemed calmer there, safer, more consistent. The nurses noted how he responded well to music, especially when Anna visited and hummed the tunes he aunt sang to her. Back in Maplewood Hollow, Anna returned to a rhythm she had never truly known, childhood. Thomas used his connections to help. Emily applied for a local scholarship fund. Within days, Anna was enrolled at Maplewood Elementary, where she received new clothes, school supplies, and something far more precious, belonging. At first, she was shy. She sat quietly in the back of the classroom, fingers clutching the sleeves of her sweater. But day by day, her voice grew stronger. She started raising her hand, laughing softly, making friends, and each afternoon, Lucky waited faithfully outside the school gate, tail wagging the moment he spotted her. Thomas often walked him there. He liked to say it was Li's idea. Emily, no working. More regular hours, began to come home earlier. She cooked again, helped with homework, even began sitting beside Anna in the evenings to read aloud, something she hadn't done in years. The house still had its cracks. Bill still came. Life was far from perfect, but there was laughter now and light in places that had long been dim. Summertime didn't look like miracles. It looked like a warm lunch, a cleanse weeder, a dog at the school gate, and a little girl. Walking home, not to serve, but simply to be a child again. Lucky became a quiet legend in Maplewood Hollow. People began to notice the German Shepherd with the sharp eyes and steady pace. Rain, snow, or sunshine, he waited at the school gate every afternoon. He didn't bark, didn't wander, just watched, tail twitching until Anna appeared. Kids would wave. Some brought him bits of sandwich crusts or saved carrots from lunch trays. Teachers started calling him the fourth grader shadow. But for Anna, Lucky was more than a shadow. He was history. Family home. He slept beside her every night. And if she stirred in sleep, he would lift his head, check on her, and then lay back down. Thomas, now a regular part of their lives, would often bring over small bags of dog treats and sit on the porch in the evenings. Sometimes he and Emily spoke in quiet tones while Anna played in the yard, her laughter echoing through feffeting light. One evening, Emily said, "I don't know how we would have come through all this without you." Thomas glanced at Lucky, who lay sprawled at Tana's feet, eyes half closed. "Don't thank me," he said softly. "He's the one who knew she needed saving." Every Sunday, without fail, the three of them made the drive. Thomas in the driver's seat, Emily beside him, and Anna in the back with Li's head resting on her lap. The care center was 30 minutes away, tucked between two small hills and surrounded by quiet pine. Daniel rarely recognized him. Sometimes he smiled politely. Sometimes he stared past them, eyes unfocused. But whenever Anna reached for his hand, something softened in him. And when she brought warm pastries, apple tarts, the kind he used to buy her after work, his eyes lit up. One afternoon, as she sat beside him on a bench outside, Daniel looked at Lucky and chuckled. "You again," he said as if they were old friends. Anna giggled. "He never leaves me, Daddy." Daniel didn't respond right away, but he nodded slowly. The nurses said his memory would never fully return. But there were fragments, brief flickers in the fog, familiar songs, Annam spoken gently, the feel of a small hand in his. Emily always brought Afito to leave behind, a picture of three of them in front of the old porch, Lucky included. "So he remembers something warm," she'd say. Even on days when Daniel was silent, Anna never stopped talking to him. Because love, she believed, didn't need to be remembered to be real. As winter softened into spring, the snow finally began to retreat from Maplewood Hollow. Icicles dropped from roof edges like tiny bells. And for the first time in months, the ground showed signs of green. In the front yard of a weathered old house, Anna knelt beside Lucky, tying a red ribbon around his neck. "For being the best rescuer," she said with a grin. Lucky licked her face in return. Thomas leaned on the porch railing, watching them. Emily stood beside him, arms crossed loosely, a quiet smell of tugging at the corners of her mouth. Life hadn't become perfect. It never does. Bill still arrived, and worries did disappear overnight. But something had shifted, not just in their home, but in each of them. Anna laughed more now. She painted pictures of Lucky, of her school, and of Daniel smelling beneath a big tree. She didn't forget what had happened, but she no longer carried it like a weight. It became as something softer, something she could set down from time to time. And Emily, too, had changed. She no longer measured her worth by hours worked or debts paid. She measured it by dinner at the table, by the stories Anna whispered before, by learning to pause. As for Thomas, he didn't say much. I never did. But sometimes when he looked at Anna, really looked, there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Something like peace. Some people say angels have wings, but to me times they come with muddy paws and a broken past. Sometimes they show up at your door clawing for help, not for themselves, but for someone they love, and sometimes love isn't about holding in. It's knowing when to let go and still show up anyway.